All right, so I am so excited to introduce our last speaker for this part, Tamara Lindeman. And Tamara Lindeman is a songwriter and singer who performs under the name The Weather Station. As The Weather Station, she has released 5 albums and toured extensively across Europe, US, Canada, and Australia. She has been nominated for a Juno, a SOCAN Award, and the Polaris Prize. Her most recent album, Ignorance, was praised as a masterpiece by The Guardian and received a Best New Music designation in Pitchfork, was profiled in the New York Times, New Yorker, and Uncut magazine, among many others. And welcome, Tamara. And we look forward to hearing what you have to say.
Very fancy. I'm embarrassed now. Yeah, so my name's Tamara. I'm a musician, and like so many of us here, I'm someone that, 2 years ago, I fell down the climate rabbit hole. I got obsessed and I felt, the climate anxiety, which gave way to climate grief, which gave way to, being that really annoying person on Facebook yelling at everyone, which gave way to showing up randomly, trying to figure out how to be useful. And ultimately, I started like an event where I basically talked about climate feelings on stage with people in my community. And then that led to a sort of strange situation where I've put out an album and I've made climate reality a big part of how I talk about my album. And so I've wound up in this funny situation where I've been talking about climate change with all sorts of media outlets and strangers and people on the internet. And somehow I just wind up in this situation where I keep talking about it. So I'm not like an expert, but I can share what I feel that I've learned. And, I'll begin with my feeling that, call me a Pollyanna, but I really believe, and everything I've experienced since I started, being very publicly forward about climate change, is that I don't think there's anyone on planet Earth right now who knows about this that doesn't feel some level of grief, fear, or sadness about the climate crisis. I really think nobody wants this to happen, and there's immense emotion around this issue. However, most of us have found a way so we don't allow ourselves to feel what we really feel. And that's why, we don't see enough climate activism. We don't see, in Canada, for example, average people, our aunts and uncles, our cousins, the people we know, they're not showing up for this issue in the way that I feel that they should. And what I find is that most people have sort of constructed a fence around the place in their heart where they care about this particular issue. And for a lot of us in the global north, people who, like me, who are wealthy and privileged and relatively safe, a lot of that fence is made up of defensiveness and also shame. 30 years of messaging about climate change being a matter of personal responsibility, I think that's really succeeded in dividing us from ourselves, from our deep care, and dividing us from each other, and inserting shame into this conversation in a way that we don't tend to feel with other collective issues like runaway capitalism. And as we all know, if any of us have ever tried to have an argument on social media, defensiveness is one of the most powerful emotions on the planet. So what I do when I walk into a climate conversation, whether it's with my mom, with a friend, with a journalist, in a public setting, is what I do is I bring into it in my heart my real belief that the other person who I'm talking to cares about this every bit as much as I do. They just don't know how to acknowledge it, and they haven't brought that into their visible heart. And the other thing that I bring into the conversation is just a knowledge in myself that when you talk about climate change to people, you are probably going to bump up against really negative, charged, heavy personal emotions. You might run into someone's defensiveness or shame. You'll see something go across their eyes, and then suddenly they want to tell you about how they don't always take a vacation. They want to tell you about their shame feelings. And I think that's something that we haven't really quite understood as a movement, is that this is very heavy. I feel like walking into a public space and talking about climate change can feel like walking into a party and talking about death. You know, a lot of people clam up and they get tense and they don't know how to feel. So I think that that's something that's really guided me. And as I say, this belief that other people care about this as much as I do, they just don't know how to move forward, or they don't know what to do, and they don't think they're allowed to show up. They don't think that they're allowed to feel what they feel. And so I just think of it as like, I'm taking down fences. I'm not trying to teach, I'm not trying to inform, I'm trying to take down a fence and allow the person to come to me. So one thing that I've found really useful is when I'm talking about this, I use the word I. I never use the word you. I use the word I. And I tell my story, I talk about how I feel. And I find that that allows people to come to me. So not unlike Gabby and Megan, who told their story in such a wonderful, vulnerable way, where they shared their uncertainty, they shared their shame, they shared their frustration, they shared their difficulty. I felt immediately an immense sense of empathy and care for them. And I wanted to show up for them and I wanted to help them out. And I literally went to the Fridays for Future website on the Zoom. And yeah, I signed up. So I guess what I wanted to express, I'm out of time, was I think of it as not unlike songwriting. You know, when you write a song that is honest and truthful and real and vulnerable, you allow people to come to you. And when you don't tell people how to feel, it often allows them to feel their own feelings and then they can show up. So yeah, that's what I wanted to say.
That's amazing. Thank you so much. Well, so much to think about and really touching as well, like moving. That's wonderful. Yeah.